We're starting to get into this symbolism of the shaving of Jerusalem. This is what God is doing at this point in history. This has to be done before that fifth trumpet blows, before the Antichrist rises, because no one repents after the Antichrist rises. No one returns to God. It's certainly those who've already returned to God will continue to be in a process of repentance. But what the word is saying is that no one is turning to God after that fifth trumpet blows. And you find that in Revelation 9. And you see very different language in those trumpets between chapter 8 and chapter 9. In chapter 8, you see that God is talking about the land and the trees and the grass and all of these things that he's used to represent his people, and that he is shaving them down. That a third are dying, a third of the trees and a third of the grass were burned up, a third of the creatures living in the sea, a third of the light and the sun and the moon. He's talking about a shaving process in which he is shaving his people. He's reducing them. And in chapter 6 of Isaiah, we talked about that being a stump. That as the terebinth and oak leave stumps when they're cut down, so the holy seed will be a stump in the land. And we talked about how this happens. That in Isaiah 6, he has told Isaiah to go and tell the people symbolically, be ever hearing but never understanding, be ever seeing but never perceiving, make the heart of this people callous, make their ears dull, and close their eyes. Otherwise they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. If you have been given an opportunity to be saved, guys, and you turn from it, that's you. You will be hardened. And God says, until the cities lie ruined and without an inhabitant, until the houses are left deserted and the fields ruined and ravaged, until the Lord has sent everyone far away and the land is utterly forsaken. And though a tenth remains in the land, it will again be laid waste. So he keeps shaving it down and shaving it down. And he's doing it through testing you. He's testing your heart to see if you really love him, if you're going to obey him, if you're going to do the things that he is moving you to do, as he's purifying, making spotless, and refining you. As he's molding that lump of clay, as he's making pure gold. If you reject it, if you hide out, I tell you this all the time, one thing that you're not dealing with will be the thing that takes you out. And Paul warned you that if you have been enlightened, you better not fall. That for those who have been enlightened, who have tasted of the heavenly gift, it is impossible for them to fall and be brought back into repentance because they are insulting the Spirit of grace and crucifying the Son all over again. We've had people who were with us for 1, 2, 3 years, and that one thing took them out. And it is shocking. One thing took you out. How could one thing take you out? You realize that one thing is the thing you put between you and God. You cannot receive what he has extended to you if you have anything between you and God, because you have chosen not to give him his rights to you. You have chosen to set up an idol. This is how he's shaving Jerusalem. And if you think I'm wrong about this, guys, go and read what he says in his word, that if a righteous person turns to wickedness, none of their righteous deeds will be remembered. They will die. Go read Revelation 2 and 3, where he's telling the people, these are the things you've done well. And it sounds like they're okay. I mean, they've been doing pretty good. You know, they've rejected false prophets. They hate the practices of the Nicolaitans. They're doing many good deeds. But I hold this one thing against you. And if you don't repent, I'm going to take your lampstand. That's what God says. Your lampstand represents the purpose for which he set you apart. If you no longer have that purpose in his body, you have no place in his body. That's what that means. So what we are talking about in this video, I realize that the title of the video has to do with Israel and Arabs, and I am going to get to that. But what we are talking about right now is a razor of judgment. God is shaving down his people. Isaiah 7. When Ahaz, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, was king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, marched up to fight against Jerusalem, but they could not overpower it. Now the house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. So the hearts of Ahaz and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. I told you in previous videos, you need to understand the separation of the two kingdoms. Israel as the northern kingdom, Judah as the southern kingdom, and Israel was wicked. It was always coming against the kingdom of Judah. And the kingdom of Judah was very small, just one tribe versus 11 tribes. And so they're scared here. Aram has allied itself with Ephraim. So you associate Aram and Ephraim as wicked. So the hearts of Ahaz, who is the king of Judah, and his people were shaken as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub. Okay, Isaiah the prophet, your son Shear-Jashub. And Shear-Jashub means a remnant will return. So we already know that God is using this as a sign. Go out, you and your son Shear-Jashub, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the launderer's field. Say to him, be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. Do not lose heart because of these two smoldering stubs of firewood, because of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliah. Now, what does he mean by two smoldering stubs of firewood? God refers to people who are being saved as a stick snatched from the fire. But he refers to those who are not being saved as smoldering stubs of firewood. They are burning. They are dying. Aram, Ephraim, and Remaliah's son have plotted your ruin, saying, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves, and make the son of Tabeel king over it. Hey, isn't this the plan of the plot of the wicked? Yes, it is. It's being used as a sign to show you the plans of the wicked, which will not take place, and we're about to read that. So they say, let us invade Judah, let us tear it apart and divide it among ourselves and make the son of Tabeel king over it. Yet this is what the sovereign Lord says. It will not take place. It will not happen, for the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is only Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim will be too shattered to be a people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is only Remaliah's son. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Now let me tell you what faith is. It means you trust God. And if you trust him, then you trust the words he says, and you obey the words he says, and you wait on the words he says. If you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. Now, what's going to happen, guys, when the enemies of God come against you and your heart is shaken as trees in a forest? A remnant will return. Goodness, I wonder what God is talking about here. If you don't stand firm in your faith, you won't stand at all, and you won't be part of that remnant. Because there are going to be a lot of things that you're going to be told to do in these end times when the Antichrist rises. A lot of things you're going to be told to bow to. And if you're not standing right now, you won't be standing later. Lots of people who've come into the body, they were so zealous for God, zealous. But then when it came to asking their bosses for Sabbaths off, they couldn't do it. When it came to them being exposed for not bearing their own children or abandoning their own children, oh, goodness, that's too much for them to bear. They had to go hide. When it came to them leaving groups of people that they had spent time with for the last 20 years, but now they know the truth, and those people are teaching falsehood, they couldn't leave the cult, guys. You know why? Because they didn't love God, and they didn't love truth. They delight in falsehood, and they buried one thing away that they were not willing to expose. They were not willing to examine. They did not trust God. They did not have faith in God that he could turn their heart and that they could actually survive that one thing that they were too afraid to deal with. You can survive the one thing, guys. Don't let one thing stand between you and God. If you do not stand firm in your faith, in your trust, you will not stand at all. Again, the Lord spoke to Ahaz, ask the Lord your God for a sign, whether in the deepest depths or the highest heights. But Ahaz said, I will not ask. I will not put the Lord to the test. Then Isaiah said, hear now, you house of David, is it not enough for you to try the patience of humans? Will you try the patience of my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means the Lord with us. I wonder why God is using all of these signs in this chapter. A remnant will return. If you don't stand faith, you won't stand at all. The Lord is with us. He's giving you some encouragement. He's going to be with you. When you pass through the waters, they won't sweep over you. When you pass through the flames, they won't burn you. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and we'll call him Emmanuel. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. Okay, well, God's letting us know that it's going to be a short time from God's perspective. It usually feels like forever to us. But he is encouraging us with this understanding that it's only a matter of time before they're destroyed, those who try to come against God's people. He will be eating curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right. For before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid waste. The Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria. Okay, now we're getting into the razor, guys. Talked about it a little bit in chapter 6. Now listen, the king of Assyria is not from Israel or Judah, doesn't claim to be from Israel or Judah. This is a foreign king. If you look up online, Google's going to tell you that modern day Assyria includes Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Kuwait, and Syria. That might be about the best that we think we have, but I want to actually show you that Lebanon is part of Assyria, and that the word tells us that. So, again, Google is not sufficient. The world is not sufficient to get our information. All right, the Lord will bring on you and your people and on the house of your father a time unlike any since Ephraim broke away from Judah. He will bring the king of Assyria. In that day, the Lord will whistle for flies from the Nile Delta in Egypt and bees from the land of Assyria. Okay, that's representing war. Just like when he talks about locusts or whirring wings, he's talking about an enemy. He's talking about someone who's going to wage war on you. They will all come and settle in the steep ravines and in the crevices in the rocks, on all the thorn bushes and at all the water holes. In that day, the Lord will use a razor hired from beyond the Euphrates River, the king of Assyria, to shave your head and your private parts and to cut off your beard also. Okay, we're going to read about that in Ezekiel 5. Listen to the language. To shave your private parts, shave your head, cut off your beard also. This is the razor of judgment. In that day, a person will keep alive a young cow, and 2 goats, and because of the abundance of milk they give, there will be curds to eat. Well, wait a minute. We just got done talking about judgment. Why are you talking about this? Because I told you in the book of Ezekiel, God shifts from talking about the wicked, what's coming on the wicked, and what's coming on his, and how he's going to bless his people and make a way for his people. And then he goes back to talking about what's coming on the wicked. So listen, in that day, a person will keep alive a young cow, and 2 goats, and because of the abundance of milk they give, there will be curds to eat. All who remain in the land. What's the land? The people. God pulled you out of the nations. He brought you together with the body. You leave the body, you're not in the land. All who remain in the land will eat curds and honey. In that day, in every place where there were 1,000 vines worth 1,000 silver shekels, there will be only briars and thorns. Okay, he's gone back to talking about the wicked. Hunters will go there with bow and arrow, for the land will be covered with briars and thorns. As for all the hills once cultivated by the hoe, you will no longer go there for fear of the briars and thorns. They will become places where cattle are turned loose and where sheep run. Before we go on to the next chapter, we're going to Ezekiel 5. Okay, Assyria is the razor of judgment. He's going to shave your head, your beard, your private parts. Listen to Ezekiel 5. Now, before we go to Ezekiel 5, I want to tell you, he's not talking about individuals, that he's going to shave your beard, your private parts, blah, blah, blah. He's talking to Jerusalem, guys. As a whole, he's talking to Jerusalem. Now, son of man, take a sharp sword, use it as a barber's razor to shave your head and your beard. Has he told Ezekiel to shave his private parts? No, he hasn't. Why? Because now he's talking to an individual and using the individual as a sign of what he's going to do to larger Jerusalem. Then take a set of scales and divide up the hair. When the days of your siege come to an end, burn a third of the hair inside the city. Take a third and strike it with the sword all around the city and scatter a third to the wind. For I will pursue them with drawn sword. Oh, okay, so that's the meaning of the vision, or that's the meaning of the symbolism that he's doing. Okay, so that represents death. Not physical death, it represents spiritual death. For I will pursue them with drawn sword. But take a few hairs and tuck them away in the folds of your garment. Again, take a few of these and throw them into the fire and burn them up. A fire will spread from there to all Israel. Now let's stop for a minute. Let's consider what he's doing as he's shaving Jerusalem down. A third dies, and then a third dies, and then a third of that dies, and then a third of that dies. Do you get the picture? He's shaving them down to a remnant. A fire will spread from there to all Israel. This is what the sovereign Lord says. This is Jerusalem. Just in case you were wondering, which I have set in the center of the nations with countries all around her. Yet in her wickedness she has rebelled against my laws and decrees more than the nations and countries around her. She has rejected my laws and not followed my decrees. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You've been more unruly than the nations around you, have not followed my decrees or kept my laws. Do you hear what he says? You're worse than the nations around you. You're worse than the pagans, guys. Gosh, I wonder if the pagans are speaking like that. Yep. They're looking at Christian Zionism and so-called Judaism, Jewish Zionism, looking at these and going, this is God's chosen people. I don't want anything to do with that. Pagans are shocked by your lewd conduct, Jerusalem. This is what the sovereign Lord says. This is Jerusalem, which I have set in the center of nations with countries all around her. Yet in her wickedness, she has rebelled against my laws and decrees more than the nations and countries around her. She has rejected my laws and has not followed my decrees. Yeah, I mean, when you go to war, you're kind of rejecting his law that says, don't murder. Don't you think? When did God talk about going to war? When did Christ talk about going to war from the New Testament on? Armageddon is not a bloodbath. Armageddon is described as the resurrection has taken place, the wedding supper of the Lamb has taken place, Jesus comes back with his bride following behind dressed in white, and he slays the wicked. He throws the false prophet and the Antichrist into the lake of burning sulfur, binds the devil for 1,000 years, and slays the rest with the double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. Is that a war, guys? No, the wicked have surrounded. The wicked are preparing for a war right now in Christian Zionism. They are literally training up a physical militia to fight against what? Jesus? And they think that once that battle is fought, that then they're going up in the resurrection because they don't know the word of God, because they've recycled a false narrative for many, many years. And this is what they have banked their entire lives on. Are you aware that this doctrine is taught in the United States military? Yep. Onward, Christian soldiers. Okay. Come on, guys. This is not a war of flesh and blood. This is a spiritual war. Put on your spiritual armor. But see, these are people who have rejected truth, so he has rejected them as his priests. They love falsehood. They delight in falsehood. They have rejected knowledge. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself am against you, Jerusalem, and I will inflict punishment on you in the sight of the nations. Because of all your detestable idols, I will do to you what I have never done before and will never do again. Therefore, in your midst, parents will eat their children will eat their parents. I will inflict punishment on you, and will scatter all your survivors to the winds. Therefore, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because you have defiled my sanctuary with all your vile images and detestable practices, I myself will shave you. I will not look on you with pity or spare you. A third of your people will die by the plague or perish by famine inside of you. A third will fall by the sword outside your walls. And a third I will scatter to the winds and pursue with drawn sword. Then my anger will cease and my wrath against them will subside, and I will be avenged. And when I have spent my wrath on them, they will know that I, the Lord, have spoken in my zeal. I will make you a ruin and a reproach among the nations around you in the sight of all who pass by. Guess what? He promised to do that in 2 Chronicles chapter 7. He said, if you go and prostitute yourself, you go and serve idols, you turn away from me, I will make you a ruin and a reproach, a byword, an object of scorn among the nations. And let me tell you why. He said, so that when those nations walk by and they say, why has the Lord done such a thing to his people? That they will answer, because they will know that these people have spurned God. Go ahead and call yourself chosen all day, counterfeit Christianity, counterfeit Judaism, Zionism, Christian nationalism. You can call yourself that all day. Hillbilly America, the false prophet that worships that image of the Antichrist, counterfeit Israel. But you'll be laid bare when he makes you an object of ridicule, a ruin and reproach among the nations in the sight of all who pass by, a taunt, a warning, an object of horror to the nations around you. When he, God, who is sovereign, who knows who his people are, who are circumcised in heart and are true Jews, who are Israel, who are Abraham's children, who have been chosen by him. He knows who his people are, and he will make those who are false, who call themselves Jews but are of the synagogue of Satan, bow down and acknowledge that he has loved the ones he's chosen. Why is he going to do that? Because the Antichrist and the image of the Antichrist, guys, in Revelation 13 is actually what's going to persecute God's people. How's that for a plot twist? The very thing that counterfeit Christianity is worshiping as an image, you know, that thing that right now is killing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and Lebanese, that thing that you're not allowed to speak against, and you're not allowed to support its enemies because then you're called a terrorist, and then you're jailed or killed, and indeed, you will be jailed and killed. When that Antichrist rises next year, it will begin doing that work. And the one executing it will be the one executing it right now. This is a sign to you of what will be done to you. So you'd better get ready in Christ, because there is no way to prepare yourself for something like that. He is the only one who's going to be able to strengthen and prepare you. You will not be able to go through that without fanning into flame God's Holy Spirit, because you're going to need him to get through that. You will be a reproach and a taunt, a warning and an object of horror to the nations around you when I inflict punishment on you in anger and in wrath and with stinging rebuke. I, the Lord, have spoken. When I shoot at you with my deadly and destructive arrows of famine, I will shoot to destroy you. I will bring more and more famine upon you and cut off your supply of food. I will send famine and wild beasts against you. Okay, so now we're introducing something else. We've been talking about the razor. Now we have famine and wild beasts, and will leave you childless. Plague and bloodshed will sweep through you, and I will bring the sword against you. I, the Lord, have spoken. Sword, famine, wild beast, and plague. I talked to you about this in the first video. We're going to talk about what I talked about in the first video again, so that I can refresh your memory on the things that God has spoken to me about that I've been telling you for 3 years. When does this happen? We have our timestamp. I'm going to show you in Revelation again when that timestamp is. I showed you in Isaiah 6 when that timestamp is. It's now, guys. We're going to go to Revelation 8. We know when Revelation 8 is. It is during the time of the witnesses. How do we know that? Because the 144,000, the witnesses, the 2 lampstands, and the 2 olive trees pouring out golden oil, 2 lampstands, which was established in Revelation 2 and 3 to be bodies of believers that are fulfilling his covenant. The 144,000, 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, seen as 12 of the 24 elders in the throne room. If you've been studying with me, all of this should start resonating and come together. They were sealed before the first 4 trumpets blew. You know why? Because when the 5th trumpet blows, the star that falls from the sky, as is written in Revelation 9, is going to overpower and kill the witnesses, as is written in Revelation 11. The reason, as is written in Revelation 12, is because those witnesses are the second criteria that is required in order to triumph over the devil. It is their testimony that is the second criteria. The first is the blood of the Lamb. And so the devil goes after the witnesses to overpower and kill them when he rises from the abyss, because he's been given that authority. He's been given that crown, as you see in Revelation 6, when he's riding out to conquer. Why is he upset? Because he knows his time is short. Why does he know his time is short? Because the witnesses' testimony has triumphed over him, along with the blood of the Lamb. So we know what the timestamp is. We know from the book of Daniel that the temple is going to be desecrated, thrown down, and the daily sacrifice is going to be abolished in the middle of that 7. We know this happens at the beginning of the 7. 1,260 days. That's how long their sacrifice is. There's less than a year left before this happens. At that time, the beast will rise from the abyss to overpower and kill the witnesses, and when he has accomplished that, he will go after you. The beast is the kingdom of the dragon. The dragon as seen in Revelation 12, the dragon as seen in Revelation 13. People worship the kingdom he has set up, and in so doing, they worship the dragon. You want to know what it is to be a Satan worshiper? That's what. People calling themselves Christian who actually worship the Antichrist. and its image. They have denied truth. They love falsehood. God has rejected them as his priests. So here's your timestamp. You just read about a third and a third and a third and a third. You read about as the terebinth and oak leaf stumps when they're cut down. You read about the shaving. You read about at the time of this shaving that God is going to bring the king of Assyria to accomplish a shaving. You're going to see as we read Isaiah that this is the time that Jews are coming in. Not later, not at the very end, guys. We are at the end, but not at the very end, because no one repents after the fifth trumpet. This is the time that they must come in. So I want to show you the language that is written in Revelation 8. Now, this is not the shaving, because this is not the king of Assyria doing it. This is actually, these are the trumpets. These are already blown. But this last year is the time of the shaving of that king of Assyria. And I'm going to show you how I know that. First, let's look at the language here. So in Revelation 8, you see that when he opens the seventh seal, silence in heaven for about a half hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. And another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer. Okay, we're going to skip down to verse 7. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled to the earth, hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up. A third of the trees were burned up. All the green grass was burned up. Does that sound like a shaving to you? This is everything that God has used to represent his people. He's likened us to grass. He's likened us to trees. He's likened us to the earth. Second angel sounded his trumpet. Something like a huge mountain all ablaze was thrown to the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures died in the sea. And a third of the ships were destroyed. A third, a third, a third. Sound like a razor to you? By the way, it's a third of what's left, and then a third of what's left, and then a third of what's left. Not a third of the entire group. A third and a third and a third and a third is representing a serious shaving down. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers, and on the springs of water. The name of the star was wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter. And many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Okay, you get the picture? Fourth trumpet it has the same pattern. Now let me ask you something. You know the way that he shaves. He has already said the way that he shaves, hasn't he? How does he shave? He hardens you. Have you seen it? Have you seen people be hardened? When COVID came, did you see evil increase, guys? Did you see that people didn't care about each other? Did you see people driving like maniacs on the road, trampling each other to get the last roll of toilet paper? Did you see a hardening of sorts? Because you should have, if you have the eyes to see. Those of you who've been in the body, you've seen people leave. Did you see a hardening happen? Did you see the zeal they started out with, and then a hardening slowly happen as they were being called into account in their covenant? Because I have. I've seen it over and over and over and over. When you talk to people about Christmas and Easter not being in God's holy word, not being holy days that God actually calls you to observe. When you talk with them about that, or you talk with them about these counterfeit Sabbaths of Saturday and Sunday, even though there's no Saturday or Sunday in the Bible, everything is based on the new moon. When you talk with people about truth, do you see the very people who, claim to be Christian, claim to love God? Do you see what happens to them? Do you see a shift and a hardening and a change in your relationship with them? Because I do. That's called a razor. That is the result of a close shave right there. That is a hardening of the heart. They are showing you who they are. They are showing you what they love. I went to someone's house not that long ago who was telling me, I don't celebrate the holidays anymore. Blessings. I went to drop some things off and saw that they had Halloween decorations everywhere. What do you mean? You've been told. You've been told. So you just decided to reject all that because that's what you love more. And not that long ago, they let me know they wouldn't be coming to Bible study anymore. That's a close shave right there. Okay? That person has been exposed. Their heart has been hardened. That is not a person who loves God. And what they said to me is, I'll listen to the videos because I do like to listen and I do believe. No, you don't. You don't believe if you don't obey. You don't believe because you heard the message. You believe when you respond to the message. Do not tell me that you believe because I know what it looks like to live out belief. We've already established in Scripture that the sword, famine, wild beast, and plague are going along with this razor. Now, there are other places where God has talked about sword, famine, wild beast, and plague. He talked about it in Jeremiah just before Babylon laid siege to Jerusalem. What have I told you? Is Babylon going to lay siege to Jerusalem? Has God used that language of Babylon the Great and the prostitutes that bore out of her and the image that bore out of her that's going to come against God's people as the Antichrist in the end times? So if he's using that language, do you think he used Babylon as a sign? Yeah, maybe. Yes, he's done this once before, and he's going to do it again, and he's going to do it again in a similar way to what he established. Let's look at what he said. Jeremiah 14:12, although they fast, I will not listen to their cry. Though they offer burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Instead, I will destroy them with the sword, famine, and plague. Now, I want you to listen to when this happens, because that's going to tell you when this razor is happening. Remember that I said you can see in Revelation 8 the same pattern of the third and the third and the third and the third. But those trumpets are not the same thing as the razor, because they're not being brought by the king of Assyria. The razor is associated with sword, famine, wild beast, and plague. And that razor comes just before Babylon lays siege to Jerusalem. Continue to listen. Jeremiah 21:7. After that, declares the Lord, I will give Zedekiah, king of Judah, his officials, and the people in this city who survived the plague, sword, and famine into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and to their enemies who want to kill them. He will put them to the sword. He will show them no mercy or pity or compassion. Oh, interesting. Okay, Lord, well, you're definitely talking the same way that you talk about the Babylon of the end times. Even though this Babylon has been fulfilled, you are speaking the same language that you speak in Revelation regarding people going into, if people are to die by the sword they will be killed. If they're to go into captivity they will go. Same language, guys. Jeremiah 21:9, whoever stays in the city will die by the sword, famine, or plague. But whoever goes out and surrenders to the Babylonians who are besieging you will live. They will escape with their lives. Jeremiah 24:10, I will send the sword, famine, and plague against them until they are destroyed from the land I gave them and their ancestors. Okay, well, let's take that, guys. Let's take that and let's understand what that means. God gave you land. He took you out of the nations. Maybe he didn't take you physically, but he took you spiritually, and he brought you to a land. He brought you to a place where you're hearing truth, where you're connecting with other believers who believe truth and obey truth. What have I said to you so many times on this channel? If you believe, you will obey. If you believe, you will come to Sabbath. You will observe with us. You will assemble with the rest of the body of believers, because that's what you're commanded to do, to assemble all the more as the day approaches. And yet there are like sometimes two, sometimes 3, 4, 5 people who join us. And there's 1,000 something people on this channel, 1,064, I think, as of today. And many more who've come to the channel and just rejected the message. Like they added and then they were like, I don't like that. I like this stuff she says about the promises of God. I don't like the stuff about me needing to fulfill my covenant. I don't like the way she talks. Well, guess what? No one's ever liked the way that God's servants, his prophets, speak. It's the reason why they've killed him. You know, show me one prophet that people liked them. Because my Bible says, woe to you when people speak well of you, for in the same way they spoke well of the false prophets before you. But blessed are those who are slandered on my account, who are persecuted, who are killed. So don't tell me that I need to change the way I'm delivering the message. I deliver the message the way I'm told to, the way I'm moved to. I know by now the hearts of the people on this channel. I know by now that that in the beginning, you know, I would bend over backwards to give information and encourage people to come and everything else. That doesn't make people come. It doesn't. You make a more hospitable environment. That isn't what makes people come. Maybe that works in the world, but that doesn't work when you're speaking the truth of God, because the truth of God is difficult to hear and it's difficult to live out. Jesus said this as well, or the word said this about Jesus in the book of John, that he did not entrust himself to them. Why? Because he knew what was in their hearts. God told Jeremiah, let this people turn to you. You must not turn to them. I know what's in the hearts of those claiming to be Christian. If you're not here, it's because you don't want to be. It's because you don't want the truth. If you listen and you don't put this into practice, it's because it's not in your heart. You seem to believe that if you ingest this with your carnality and gather enough information, that you're going to be saved by that. But I told you from the very beginning, We're going to go through these chapters and we're going to understand God's heart. I'm not going to fast forward and give you the answers to the prophecy and the things that God has been speaking to me so that you can somehow go control that by the work of your hands. If you don't care about his heart, this is not the channel for you. You want to just hear a message so that you stay privy to what he's doing? I don't think so, guys. There's no wisdom in that. There's no understanding in that. You cannot hear a message or read God's word and prepare yourself. You need to be prepared by returning to him. And the only way that you can truly return to him is by pursuing his heart. That is the commandment that Jesus said. This fulfills everything. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. If you do that, everything will flow out of that. Let's read Jeremiah 24:10 again. I will send the sword, famine, and plague against them until they are destroyed from the land I gave them and their ancestors. If you have been pulled out of the nations and you've been given eyes to see, you have been enlightened and tasted of the heavenly gift, and you choose to fall, or you choose not to do the other things that God has said to do, like care about the body and assemble with the body, it is impossible for those who've been enlightened and tasted of the heavenly gift to fall and be brought back into repentance, because you are crucifying the Son of God all over again and insulting the Spirit of grace. You will be destroyed from the land that he gave you as an opportunity to be saved. You will be expelled from the camp. Jeremiah 27:8. If, however, any nation or kingdom will not serve Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, or bow its neck under his yoke, I will punish that nation with the sword, famine, and plague, declares the Lord, until I destroy it by his hand. Jeremiah 32:24. See how the siege ramps are built up to take the city. Okay? You should know that the siege ramps are built up to take the city. Like, they're ready to do this. The only thing holding them back is the hand of God. This will happen next year. And if you think that it's exaggerative to say that they're doing this a year in advance, believe me, this is what's in their heart. God has put it in their heart. They're doing it right now. Those people who counterfeit Christianity as worshiping hate Christians. They can't stand them. And they can't stand the United States. They call the United States Israel's sugar daddy. They resent the United States and they resent Christians. You think that, they're saying, we're going to die for you. We're going to bear the covenant for you. Okay. Oh my goodness, I feel so honored. And you got this from where? The Messiah that we don't believe in? Don't be stupid, guys. No one in Zionism even believes in God. They don't obey him. That's how I know that they don't believe in him. They don't follow his law. They are murderers. Why would they even be able to hear your message of Christianity? Why would you even join with them when Paul said they're enemies as far as the gospel is concerned? They're not going to bear your covenant for you. You're going to be persecuted by the Antichrist if indeed you belong to Christ. Jeremiah 32:24. See how the siege ramps are built up to take the city. Because of the sword, famine, and plague, the city will be given into the hands of the Babylonians who are attacking it. What you said has happened, as you now see. When does this happen? It happens before the Babylonians take God's people captive. When do you think this is going to happen? It's going to happen as Babylon is laying siege to Jerusalem. Jeremiah 32:36. You are saying about the city, by the sword, famine, and plague, it will be given into the hands of the king of Babylon. But this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Okay, then he goes on about, I think he ends up talking about, why are you telling me to buy a field? The reason I'm reading this passage is because I'm demonstrating to you once again that the sword, famine, and plague are what he's using in order to weaken this nation so it's easy for Babylon to just take over. Okay, I'm not going to read any more of Jeremiah. If you would like to read the rest of these passages, then open up a Bible app, type in, what did I type in? Sword, famine, plague into Bible Gateway, and you can see all of the passages. I've established my point of the timing, so I'm moving on. Now, I'm not going to read any more chapters of Isaiah because this video is getting a little bit long, and I know that I don't end up retaining people's attention when it's a lot of dense information, which is understandable. What I do want to tell you is that if you've been listening to this channel for a while, then you are my witness that God has been talking to me about this for a while, for about 2.5 years to be exact. He's been talking with me about sword, famine, and plague. And at that time, I spoke with you about a pattern that God has established in which he has brought, when, as with World War I, World War II, will be again with World War III, financial collapse, economic collapse of 1914, Spanish influenza wiped people out. So you have economic collapse, plague, and then war, wild beast and sword, okay? Sword, famine, plague. Don't be tripped up by famine. Famine would have represented livelihood in biblical times because they were working the land. That was their currency. For them, that was representing, economic collapse. If you didn't have a crop, you have no currency. How are you going to survive? If God sends something to eat up your grain, he sends weevils in your wheat, you don't have any currency anymore. So that language of economic collapse, war, and plague is exactly what he's talking about here. Sword, famine, wild beast, and plague. Wild beast and sword are both representing war and death. Turns out, God didn't just do that with World War I or World War II. He's not going to just do it with World War III. And he did it. He's been doing this. This has been his pattern. And he's going to do it again. And we've already had a pretty big plague, right? COVID. Not that he won't send more. We've already had economic collapse. And he's going to send more because he's been talking to me about more. And we can see right now that stupid counterfeit Israel is attacking Lebanon's economic infrastructure. Oh, well, that gives people some ideas, doesn't it, guys? And God says he's going to bring the king of Assyria, this foreign nation that represents the very countries that are allied. But let me show you something. Isaiah 10, verse 34. He will cut down the forest thickets with an axe. Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. Now, he is talking about the judgment that he brings on Assyria. So Lebanon, even though Google did not show us that Lebanon was part of ancient Assyria, the word does. And don't sit here and take this as Arabs are your enemy. Who's your enemy, guys? The one who counterfeit Christianity is worshiping. Counterfeit Christianity, the Antichrist, and its image that it has set up and worships. That's the one doing all of this. Have they not given them the idea to attack economic infrastructure? Have they not basically said, oh, well, this is on the table now? Pretty darn stupid. Well, what is Israel's economic infrastructure? What is their bank? What's their sugar daddy? We're going to war. Don't think for a second that we are not going to war. We are going to war. I can't believe the stupidity of these political commentators that I hear talking, like not even seeing what's at the door. When you attack Netanyahu's residence and attempt to assassinate him and his wife, things have shifted. Does anyone have any common sense anymore? But people are acting like this is no big deal. Oh, not a big deal. Don't need to look over there. That's a big deal, guys. When you've killed all the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah, and now there's a leak that is telling you, is exposing the heart of America and the heart of Israel and what their intentions are and what they're going to do. I shared in a video the other day, I was listening to Scott Ritter, and Scott Ritter's like not making a big deal of it. And he's saying, oh, well, taking it from the perspective of like what this means for our election. Who cares what this means for our election? What does this mean for war? Do you think Iran is going to look at this and they're going to say, oh, I wonder what that means for the United States election, that this information was leaked? Or do you think they're going to look at the document and be like, oh, okay, Israel wants to attack us and eviscerate us, and the United States is continuing to fund this, and they know full well what it is that Israel is doing, and they're doing their bidding, which is, Nasrallah had already said that in interviews. Obviously, he's not here anymore. But he had already said in interviews that they full well understood that Israel is doing the bidding of the United States. Or at least has been. I mean, maybe Israel is this Frankenstein that's out of control now, which I can see as well. But the bottom line is, this is what Iran is going to be focused on. They're going to look at that document and they're going to say, oh, okay, this isn't your plan. Looks like all of this patience that we've been giving to you, this opportunity to back up, this, delaying of a regional war, all these lies about, talks about ceasefire, it looks like that's not really in your heart. Oh boy. I just looked down at my Bible, and the next chapter that we're on is chapter 8. And this is going to talk about this Maher Shalal Hashbaz that's being used as a sign to represent quick to the plunder, swift to the spoil. This using of the king of Assyria, the club that is in God's hand of his wrath. Lots more to be revealed. But what I'm trying to do is tie in what God has been talking to me about with regard to war. Because, these things kind of seemed, even my daughter was saying, it just seems like, and it felt like this for me, like, okay, you're talking to me about war. Okay, you're talking to me about judgment. Okay, you're talking to me about overflowing their hiding place. All right, you're talking to me about economic collapse. Like, where is all of this? How does all of this go together? It starts to feel like, and this is why I told you, in this second video, you have to be able to maintain a certain level of ambiguity in order to wait until God brings that picture together, because he's not spoon feeding you. If he did, you'd be like, okay, thanks. And then you'd be off on your own, leaning on your own understanding, wouldn't you? We've done it a million times. I'm the same way. So, he's not spoon feeding me. Obviously, he knows better. He will give you pieces of information and then cause you to pant for him and hang on him and, but Lord, what does this mean? Like that every day, day after day after day. And then years later, he'll be like, okay, now I want you to read this over and over and over and over. Okay, Lord, but what does it mean? And he'll give you some things. I mean, I'm telling you very literally, this is the process that I've gone through with him. But what does it mean? But what does it mean? And I have this going on and I need you to do something. So, here's another layer of this, is that in the midst of him revealing all of this, he's going to crush you so that you're actually motivated to stay in the game and keep trying to discern this with him. So, like maybe your house is in foreclosure. Maybe you don't have any more money to live on. And you're desperate for him to okay, well, tell me what it means now. All right? So that's what I'm trying to tell you, is that there is a way that God does things. And it's not our way, and it's not for our comfort. And not a single one of God's prophets have ever been comfortable. Show me one. They are not comfortable. They are not liked. No one likes their message. No one's jumping for joy over it. So don't expect it to be that way now. A lot more to come. So I hope that you will stay tuned and meet me in the next video so that we can talk about the king of Assyria and what's going to happen. Please discern this message with God.